Hi everybody, it's me, Spring, the fiber enthusiast. Okay, so here is my blindfolded granny square, and I've got this out for a reason. We'll talk about it in just a second. This video is for Dana's Wonderlust Crochet, and anybody else actually. It's not necessarily a tutorial, it's more of a challenge. During her live today, she had this brilliant idea and was talking about, hey, I wonder if it would work or if you could do the center to a granny square with a chainless double crochet foundation row. And it kind of went back and forth, and one of the viewers, which also has a channel, and I'm so sorry I cannot remember who exactly it was, and I'm terribly sorry for the person that did it. She actually did it while Dana was explaining what she was thinking in her head. And she said it did work, which I thought about it and it sounded doable. The only concern I had was the center and the strength of the center and what you might need to do to strengthen the center of your granny square. So that's why this video. What I'm going to do is set this here so we can keep an eye on it and look at it. And let's attempt to do the 4 clusters of double crochets as a foundation chainless start, for instance. So instead of making a magic loop and crocheting around our magic circle and crocheting around it, or chaining so many and then slip stitching to the first chain, we're going to create a slip knot. And now you're going to go over this with me. I have yet to do this. So this is like as bare and raw and new as possible. Okay, so I'm going to leave a longer tail than normal because the more I think about it, the more I think that there's going to have to be some type of structure in the center. So just in case, I'm going to go ahead and leave a longer tail. So now I'm going to do what would be a traditional chainless foundation or double crochet foundation chainless start. If you have been watching me, you will see that this is different than what I did in my tutorials. And I'm going to explain it as I go because I'm doing one extra step in this to make it the traditional double crochet chainless foundation start than what I did in my tutorials. Okay, so to start with, because it's a double crochet, we're going to go ahead and chain 2. And now yarn over and insert your hook into that very first chain, yarn over, pull up a loop. Here's that step that I skip when I do mine. So we're not going to skip it for this. Yarn over, pull through 1 loop and 1 loop only. That's giving you your second chain. So now let's do our double crochet that sits above that chain. Just like that. Okay, so yarn over and go into that chain. Yarn over, pull up a loop. Yarn over, go through 1 and 1 only. That creates your 3rd chain. Yarn over, go through 2, yarn over, go through 2. That completes your 3rd double crochet. So now we need If you look down here at the center of the granny square, you have 4 of those 3 double crochet clusters. In between them, you have a turning the corner chain 2. So each one has a chain 2 in between, so that way you can turn a corner. So now we need to chain 2, so 1 and 2. And again, we're going to continue on. I've explained that little extra step there, so I'm just going to move on because this is about turning this into the center of the granny square. So yarn over, insert your hook into the chain, pull up a loop, yarn over, go through 1, yarn over, go through 2, yarn over, go through 2 more. Yeah, that was a little quicker. So here we go. We need 2 more double crochets to complete that little cluster of 3 double crochets. So that'll be our second cluster. Now we need to chain 2 so we can turn a corner. And we're just going back into that chain just as if we never even created that chain 2 there. And 3 more double crochets. Okay, so now we have 3 sets of double crochets. We need to chain 2 so we can turn another corner and continue on. Let's do our last group of 3 double crochets to make our 4th cluster. Too many numbers going on in my head. So there's 1. Okay, 1. 2. And 3. Okay, so now we need to make our last corner, but we also need to think about when we attach this. If we make our last corner by chaining 2, let's go ahead and do that for video's sake here. And we reach over to the top of our chain 2 and slip stitch to join, right? We have this big gap. So you would need your long tail to stitch the 2 together to start with, and then to weave around and draw in the center, because you're going to have some stability. This is very, very loose. And over time, it would just become a big circle instead of a square. So I think what I'm going to do is let's take out the chain 2 and the very last double crochet. Okay. So I think what I'm going to do is yarn over, insert my hook into that chain just as if I was going to start my next and my final double crochet. And I'm going to reach over here to that very first chain and insert my hook into the very first chain, yarn over and pull through that very first chain, then pull through the last chain that I made. Now I have 3 loops on my hook. I'm going to complete this by doing a chain 1, then go through 2, go through 2, just as if we were completing it exactly the same. Now I'm going to chain 2, 1, 2, and slip stitch to the top of that beginning chain 2 to complete the round. Okay, so as you see, it has joined it together, but it's still very unstable. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and cut this away from the ball. And let's sew up the center and get some stability to it. Get a needle and take our long tail. I started with, you know, oh, I don't know, it's about 6 inches or so. About, yeah, 6, 8 inches. You probably don't need that much. 4 to 6 inches would be more than enough. I just went ahead and left a really long tail. All right. So my suggestion would simply be to weave this tail in and out through, go down through one chain, up through the next, down through the next, up through the next, and continue weaving back and forth all the way around. Down, up, down, up, down, up, until you get back to the beginning. Right, down and up. And now we're at the beginning here. And then cinch it down like you would if you were going around and around and around the beginning with your tail of a standard granny square. So you would go around and back and forth, cinch it down if you were to sew in the tail on the standard granny square, right? Well, maybe you don't, but that's what I would do. So we're doing the same thing. We're cinching it down so that way it gives it some stability. And let's go ahead and go back the opposite direction once you feel comfortable with the tightness of the center of your circle here. The circle to your granny square. So I'm going to go back the opposite direction till I get back to the beginning. And then I'll go and finish sewing in this end, just weaving it back and forth now. Just to kind of give this stability, because the whole purpose behind the chainless start is to assist in not having to make such a chain, first of all. Second of all, it gives it the stretch and give as if you had just finished a project instead of starting a project. So that's the whole purpose behind the chainless start, is so that way you don't have one side tighter than the other, and allows a lot more give than what a chain will give you. So let me go ahead and clip that away so we can look at this a little bit better. Okay. So as always, you have to block your squares, but here we go. So if we look at these, from the above view, they look relatively the same. So without sewing the end in the traditional granny square, I do have a good strong center because of the chain that I use to create my center. Now that I have sewed my center, that very starting tail, I now have a decent amount of stability and it won't look like a circle after time. So here we are. It looks very similar. Very, very similar. So Dana, to answer your question, yes, it is possible. It is very doable. Would I use it? Probably not, but somebody might. So that's a quick little test and challenge. Thank you, Dana, for throwing that out there and giving me something to think about and challenge myself. As always, it's awesome to challenge yourself daily. So there you have it, everybody. You can start a granny square with a double crochet foundation chainless start. Just make sure and leave yourself a good tail to start with to sew the center up. And yeah, there you have it. All right, everybody, have a wonderful evening. Be blessed, or day, whichever when you're watching this. And be blessed and be a blessing. Bye, everybody.